When we think about global conflicts, we imagine borders, armies, ideologies, and political leaders. We picture battlefields, alliances, and military strategies. But what if the real engine behind most conflicts isn't political at all? What if the true driver of global tension is something we rarely see, yet feel in every part of our lives? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Global conflicts are almost never only about politics. They are about economics, resources, markets, energy, debt, trade routes, currency power, financial influence. These forces, silent, complex, and invisible, shape more wars and geopolitical crises than any ideology ever has. Because the real mystery is this: why do nations fight? Behind every public reason, democracy, religion, national security, there is almost always a deeper economic motive. And once you follow the money, the world begins to make sense in ways most history books never explain. Today, we're uncovering the hidden economics behind global conflicts, the real causes nations go to war, the financial systems that sustain these conflicts, and why the world continues to repeat the same patterns. To understand the economic roots of conflict, we need to travel back to the earliest civilizations. Ancient empires didn't wage war for ideology. They fought for resources, fertile land, water access, gold, spices, taxes, slaves, and trade routes. The Roman Empire expanded to secure grain supplies. The Mongol Empire expanded for tribute and wealth extraction. European powers in the age of exploration fought over spices, sugar, silver, and gold. Even religious wars often hid economic motives: the control of trade hubs, ports, or fertile territory. But the world changed dramatically in the 18th and 19th centuries. The Industrial Revolution introduced something entirely new: an enormous hunger for energy, raw materials, industrial output, and global markets. Nations needed coal, oil, iron, rubber, cotton, labor, and shipping lanes. Economic competition intensified, and with it came global conflict. Here's the twist: as economies grew more complex, conflicts grew more complicated too. Wars were no longer just about resources. They became entangled in currency values, debt, financial markets, global trade rules, economic alliances, industrial capacity, and foreign investment. War stopped being merely physical. It became deeply financial. And this evolution continues today. Let's begin with mercantilism, the economic philosophy of the 16th to 18th centuries. Nations believed power came from accumulating gold and controlling trade. The logic was simple: more exports meant more wealth and more military power. This idea sparked wars such as the Anglo-Dutch rivalry for global the Spanish-Portuguese battles over colonial wealth, and countless naval conflicts for control of trade routes. Economics didn't just influence conflict, it was the conflict. Then came industrialization. Factories needed raw materials. Cities needed food. Railroads needed steel. Nations needed energy. And industrial warfare required massive supplies of iron, coal, oil, nitrates, and copper. Resource competition became existential. That's why Britain sought Middle Eastern oil, Germany pushed for overseas markets, and Japan expanded across Asia for industrial resources. The world's first truly global conflicts were routed not in ideology, but in resource scarcity, industrial needs, and economic insecurity. As global trade grew, nations became economically interdependent, but this interdependence created new tensions. Economic power became military power. The stronger a nation's economy, the larger and more advanced its military could become. Market access became a matter of national survival. Losing a customer base meant economic decline. Resource competition intensified. Industrial societies fought to control oil fields, mining regions, shipping routes, ports, and colonies. Financial systems became tools of power. Banks, lenders, and currency dominance shaped global influence. All these pressures converged in the early 20th century. World War I may have been sparked by political assassination, but economic insecurity and industrial competition made it possible. World War II was driven by desperation. Germany needed land and resources. Japan needed oil and raw materials. Italy sought industrial relevance. Economics didn't cause these wars alone, but it made them almost inevitable. When economic rivalry reaches its peak, conflict becomes nearly unavoidable. The Great Depression is a key example. The global collapse of the 1930s created unemployment, extremism, and desperation. Trade collapsed, tariffs skyrocketed. Economic nationalism fueled aggressive foreign policy. Another example: Resource embargoes. When the United States cut off oil exports to Japan in 1941, Japan faced a choice: retreat or attack. Pearl Harbor wasn't ideological, it was economic. Currency and debt crises also destabilized nations. Weimar hyperinflation in Germany, Latin American debt crises, and Middle Eastern currency collapses all contributed to regional tensions. Economic instability often leads directly to geopolitical instability. After conflicts end, nations face massive financial consequences. Debt remains for generations. Wars are funded by borrowing, and the bill outlives the conflict. Reconstruction requires enormous spending. Cities, factories, and infrastructure must be rebuilt, often using foreign loans. Economic realignment reshapes the world. Defeated nations lose industries and markets. Victors redesign trade systems to benefit themselves. Currency resets occur. Major wars frequently lead to new monetary systems. Bretton Woods, after World War II, the petrodollar system in the 1970s, and globalization in the 1990s. War doesn't end when the fighting stops. Its economic consequences shape the next century. Nations have tried to prevent economic causes of conflict through trade alliances, international organizations, diplomacy, and global financial institutions. But economic tensions always return, because resources are finite. Economic power shifts. Globalization creates winners and losers. Financial systems remain fragile. Economic competition doesn't disappear. It evolves. Today, the world is more connected than ever, yet global conflict remains deeply economic. Energy geopolitics fuels tension over oil, gas, pipelines, and rare minerals. Strategic trade routes, like the Strait of Hormuz and the South China Sea, have enormous economic importance. Technology and semiconductor wars determine national competitiveness. Currency power shapes global influence, with the US dollar at the center and rising powers seeking alternatives. Debt diplomacy allows nations to influence political decisions. Economic sanctions have become tools of pressure. Resource scarcity, from freshwater to farmland to energy supplies, continues to drive geopolitical conflict. In the 21st century, economics and conflict are more intertwined than at any point in history. So, here are the final takeaways. First, most conflicts have deep economic roots. Ideology may be the surface story, but economics is almost always the foundation. Second, economic interdependence creates peace and tension. Global trade connects nations, but also creates vulnerabilities and rivalries. Third, economic power shapes global power. Nations compete not just with armies, but with currency, markets, technology, and financial influence. Here's the final warning. Global conflicts are often seen as political events, but the real story hides beneath the surface. As competition for resources, markets, and financial influence increases, the world may be entering a new era where economic pressures once again push nations toward confrontation. If you want to understand the hidden forces shaping our world, the economics behind global power, international conflict, and the future of geopolitical stability, subscribe to The Dark Economy. Because to understand global conflict, you must understand the economics driving it.